Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Nordic Sound Channel. As always, I am your host, Jameson Foster, and today I am joined by one of the most requested bands that I've had in the last few months on this channel with me. Two gentlemen from VVAKI. Would you guys like to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, hi, I'm Will Hunter. I am one of the singers, songwriters in Vévaki.
Cool. And what instruments do you play?
So I play some drums, I play tagelharpa, I play a lyre, Krabic lyre, um, and various other things. But yeah, those are the main ones.
Cool. Yeah, that's a start. How about you, Sigur Bodhi?
Yeah, my name is Sigurd, and I'm also a composer in Vévaki, and I play the percussion and taktharpa.
Awesome. Yeah, so just to give you guys a little bit of background, you guys somehow flew under the radar with me for quite a while, and then around the time you guys were announced for Midgardsblot, all of a sudden, like all of my patrons were like, "Hey, you've got to have Vévaki on," and I was like, "All right, I guess I'll check these guys out." And very impressed with your guys' music, but most of all, as I told whichever one of you runs the Instagram, super impressed with your show at Midgardsblot, guys. It was just like genuine. It fit in, and you guys, when you work in this kind of music style, it's like sometimes it's hard to like carve out your own voice in all the noise and all the bands. But you guys, you were one of the favorites of the performances there. So what was that like playing at Midgardsblot for the first time, but not only that, playing outside of Iceland apparently for the first time? Whichever one of you wants to go first.
Yeah, it was great. It was epic, and thank you so much for being there.
Yeah.
Um, everything I feel like everything, as it always is with performing, like everything leading up to the performance is stress, and we had some technical stresses and stuff like that, but once we got on stage and we got into that first song, like we just felt right at home. I think yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Speaking as a performer myself, I love and hate playing live just because the feeling going up to it is like awful. You're just like, oh, I want to get this over with. But then, as you said, once you're on that stage, it feels like you're at home. So
Yeah.
that was a really beautiful way to put it. Sigurd Bodhi, how about you?
It was unreal to see. I mean, we expected people to show up, but we didn't expect so many people. And yeah, after the show, people were stopping us everywhere, thanking us. It was like nothing we expected how people would react. It was such a nice and like humbling to see that people appreciate uh, our show and our music.
Yeah, for your show in particular was one of those. This happens with a few bands every year, where like the crowd starting off right. It just keeps growing as your set goes on, as people hear you from a distance. So like, I got to check this shit out. And I was looking around at the size of the crowd by the end of your show, and it was like very clear to me that you were making a connection with people. And so that was really cool for me to see, especially as someone who is a relative newcomer to your music, and seeing other people sort of have the same opening experience that I did, where I was like, these guys are pretty tight. So you mentioned having some sound issues, and I'm just gonna tell you guys, since I do know that a lot of the people who watch this are Midgardsblot goers too. You guys were not the only ones with sound issues on that stage, so I'm glad you guys worked through it. So
Oh,
quite a few
yeah.
musicians on the Cowponger stage had to. Yeah.
I think for us, we just hear what's in our in-ear monitors. So
Yep.
I don't know what it sounded like to you guys, but it was just yeah, just some frequency in-ear monitor issues. Like the frequencies that we usually use in Iceland are apparently military. So there's some things like illegal or something. So we had to rush deliver some wired in-ear monitors from some shop in Oslo to the hotel just to be able to play. And it was all a bit stressful, but it was fine. It worked out in the end.
Yeah, that's all you needed was just like more stress on top of the
Yeah.
stress of already playing at a festival. But at the risk of fawning over you guys too much here right at the beginning, no one could tell that you guys had audio issues at all. It was just a pretty solid performance. And I guess what I want to move on to here is sort of like, a lot of people get into this music style for different reasons, and it's pretty interesting to me. Despite the fact that a lot of this music has Icelandic roots, at least in like mythology and literature, you guys, I think, are like my first Icelandic group that I've had on this channel, and the ones that I've gotten to talk to. So I would love to hear from the perspective of, you know, an Iceland-based group. How did you guys get into this style of music? Or I would love to just hear the Icelandic perspective of how you guys got into this style of music. Whoever wants to go first.
Well, I mean, nobody can deny that the main, like, when people get introduced to this kind of music, it's usually Vardruna.
Yep.
That's what sparks interest in most people.
Yep.
Which is totally, you know, like, understandable. They are so great, and
Mm-hmm.
that's how I got into it at first. I worked a lot with Donheim in the beginning.
Okay.
I did some vocals and stuff for him, but I just mostly been doing stuff on my own until I met Will. Um, Maybe Will can take over for now, how we met and all that.
Yeah, I mean, I had gotten into I've been into folk music kind of my whole life, but getting into finding bands like Garmana, and yeah, just different like traditional folk like that. And I've always had an interest in this mythology. My mom raised me with a love for runes and Tolkien and mythology and shit. So
Cool, man.
yeah. So yeah, I had read a couple of the Icelandic sagas, and I decided to go to Iceland where I met Sibali. And yeah, we just started playing music together. I think when we met, we didn't even really have a full conversation. We met at a Viking market in a town called Hafnarfjörður, and he was just like, "Hey, I have a big drum. Do you want to come see it?"
What a
It's like,
pickup line.
yeah. And then we were like drumming and throat singing in a little tent. So yeah, love at first sight. But yeah, that's how we got. And then yeah, I guess we just vibed. The next day we went to I think it was the summer solstice. So the Ausutru organization in Iceland was doing a solstice ritual.
Mhm.
Yeah, we played more music, and then I think you're the ones who really told me I should start recording stuff, and then he helped me record the first album, Edda, which was originally just my solo project.
Mhm.
Sorry, does that answer your question?
No, it
Yeah.
definitely does. I've actually got first off, I would love, so I've got two directions I want to go with what you just told me. I'm going to start with probably the easy one first. Have you seen Garmin live before, or was that your first time, if you even got the
Oh no,
chance to
that
see them?
yeah, that was the first time, and it was really cool.
Yeah, really cool.
Garmin, I have this running list of bands that like inspired what, just for the ease of conversation, I'm going to just call like Viking music, even though I kind of don't like that term at all. It's just the easiest one I have to use. um I have this running list of bands that sort of inspired Viking music that weren't Viking music themselves, and Garmina is definitely on that list. So at least at the beginning, how much of Garmina's sound influenced you guys, just to start at least?
Um, I don't know. I think it was a good like gateway into a
Mhm.
lot of different music, and I remember because I was quite like interested in the runes, and I remember looking up. I was like, are there any bands that make music about the runes? And that's how I found Vardruna. Um, but yeah, I think the want to explore traditional instruments and stuff came from bands like that for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think I think the rise of, like you say, Viking music, which I also don't really like calling, it's more like Nordic folk, Neofolk something,
Yep.
is they are inspired by, of course, Nordic folk music.
Mhm.
Like, what inspires a lot of our music is the way Icelandic, it's called tvísöngur or fimmundasöngur, is performed, where there's a lot of harmonies, because instruments were not that common in Iceland.
Mhm.
They were expensive and rare, so people would just use their voices, and that's the main focus on VVAKI, is the voice. And that's, I think, what sparks like interest in bands like Hetningara, Karmana, and stuff like that, is that they are using these old songs and bringing new life to them using perhaps modern instruments, or mixing it with old instruments as well.
Yeah, very well put. And it's funny because you're tickling the ethnomusicology side of me that sort of like studies the history of music traditions in all of the Nordic countries. And so I'm gonna try and resist the urge to like really dork out about that. But I guess on the other hand, like outside of Tvísonger and all of the other vocal music traditions of Iceland, what other sorts of outside of Garmina, what other sorts of Nordic folk or just general folk music were really, I don't know, stuck in your ears when you guys were really deep in that traditional side of it?
Well, for me, for all of us, I would say, I think Steindor Anderson, who's a Rimur singer. Do you know him?
Yep.
Yeah, he's a huge influence, and yeah, I think our love for Rimur will come out on the next album, in Tvísonger and all that kind of stuff. We
Awesome.
want to explore, yeah, we want to explore more of the traditional Icelandic sounding things. But yeah, so really,
No, I think yeah, like we mentioned Karmana, they are fantastic. But my sort of introduction would have been more in the Hetningana, or the heathens, as they
Yep.
actually what it means. But yeah, I mean, as you know, growing up in Iceland and being very much into this kind of music, I surrounded myself with people who perform rimur and tísungur, stuff like that. But nothing that I really know has been recorded. I mean, people just kind of gather and sing and have fun together. But yeah, definitely Steindor Anderson as well. He's an absolute legend.
yeah.
Yeah, so this is this is the reason that I don't do like outlines of like where I want the conversation to go, because this is already way better than anything I could have planned. So I'm gonna stick on this Icelandic music thing for a second, because something that is really interesting to me is that a lot of the people who get into this style of music, almost all of them either start in one or two places, either just heavy metal or traditional folk music, and usually people don't think there's any overlap. But this is one of those weird music scenes where just like people, you go to Midgardsblot and you see both sides, the folk music nerds and the metalheads just coming to the same place. And so for you guys, hearing that you started off really loving like more traditional stuff, what does it mean for you guys to sort of like, you're not doing traditional folk, you're definitely doing like your own thing that we would broadly call neofolk. What does it mean to you guys to sort of like take your love of traditional music but make something completely new with it?
I mean, I think that's the natural way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, you talked about, calling this genre Viking music, and of course we see that all the time in the comments. And not to say that the Vikings sagas aren't cool, Egil
Mm-hmm.
saga and all that. We love those stories, but
Mm-hmm.
we're not Vikings, and we have nothing to do with Vikings really. Our music is based on our modern spiritual traditions and also through heathenism, animism, and yeah, just these the spiritual practice still exists long after the Vikings, and um, yeah, so we're not tied to. I mean, I have metal strings on my tagelharpa, like that is definitely for the strict ones out there. That's definitely not cool, but yeah, and obviously we work with Gisli Gunnarsson, who's a wonderful Icelandic modern classical composer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's tons of weird sounds that are not traditional in our music, in the backgrounds and stuff, synthesizers and strange things.
Yeah, we decided not to tie us down to be like we have to be within this parameter. We, of course, it's a cliche to say, but we are expressing ourselves with our music, but more so we are uh, doing what we want to do, even though we still are doing Nordic folk music. We don't shy away from using technology to make soundscapes and all that, because it's our music. We can do whatever we want with it.
I
Mm-hmm.
also feel like with Gisli's edition, like there is a modern classical sound that I feel like is very specific to Iceland. They get with like Johan Jansson and Oliver Arnolds and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it keeps it rooted in Iceland, to be honest.
So cool. Yeah. So I guess like I can already imagine some people are having a question right now that like, if where you come from is this love of more traditional stuff, And now you're doing this VVAKI stuff, which is very much your own, even though it's rooted in your love of traditional music. I can already hear now someone saying, well, why don't you just play traditional music? And I just sort of want to like tee you guys up for an answer that you would give.
Uh, Me and Tottenham do, but in our free time.
Okay.
It's just this is what we want to hear for Vévaki.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's okay to have your, you know, foot in both worlds. And same with metal, like I'm wearing a Watain hoodie right now. Like
I noticed.
But yeah, there is even some screaming on Edda from Sirwali that he probably doesn't remember recording.
I remember listening to it. Yeah. Yeah, cool. So like, by the way, I love that you mentioned Olafur Arnalds. That guy does not get enough attention outside of Iceland, I feel, or at least in the States. I've been in love with him ever since. I remember I was in college the first time I ever listened to, oh, what is it called? And They Have Escaped the Weight of Darkness, the album with the eclipse on the front. That album messed me up. Like, you know what I mean? That leaves an impression on you. It takes you through a journey and you're not quite the same on the other side.
Yeah, that one and For Now I'm Winter had a big impact on me as well. That's a cozy album.
It is cozy. I like that. So awesome. So the other direction I wanted to take this in is, so I mentioned at the beginning that before I started the recording that Americans have a lot of wild imaginations when it comes to Iceland in particular. And something that me and Matthias Nordvig, I think to some of you guys might be familiar with him. He used to do the Nordic Mythology podcast. We talk all the time about how like Iceland tries to be, at least in terms of its tourism, like a bougie American city with like all of its designer clothes and all of this. But then the way that, especially the way they advertise in Icelandair, like if you have to sit there and just like watch that little TV while you're sitting on the airplane, it's flashing these images of like a very modern Iceland. But a lot of Americans think of Iceland as this place where it's just like, no, it's still Vikings, right? And I know it's probably a little bit of both, but just from your guys' perspective, in general in Iceland, how is this sort of music that you guys are playing, or just this obsession with, you know, Nordic inspired heathenry that a lot of the world seems to have? How is that stuff viewed in Iceland, at least from your perspectives? I'm not expecting you to speak for Iceland, just from what you guys observe.
Well, viewed is people don't really care either way. I don't think people have much of a strong opinion. A lot of people like it, I guess. But in terms of Iceland being this Viking paradise and heathen Mecca or whatever, it absolutely isn't. It's just, you know, the landscape and everything is beautiful, but as for culture, we are pretty just kind of Western normal culture, I guess. And most people, like, if you pick a random person out of crowd, chances are they don't really care about any of this stuff. Most people don't. But there are plenty of people who do, but they gather, you know, they're trying to keep things alive by meeting, doing rimur and all that. And of course we have the Ása trúfélagið in Iceland, like the Ása church, I guess, but church is the wrong term. They're quite active. I personally, like, I focus more just on myself and like animism and animistic practices. But yeah, so in general, Icelanders don't really give a shit about any of this, in my experience.
It's funny, like it just reminds me of when you're talking about how Americans view Iceland, like what they think they're walking into. Like Sirwali has tons of stories as a tattoo artist. Do you want to tell the one about the tacos?
Please.
Forget.
So you were tattooing this lady, and she said something along the lines of like, in America we have these things called tacos. I don't know if you've ever heard of them.
Oh yeah. It's like, what these things called tacos? You say? No, of course.
Meanwhile, you have a banging Mexican restaurant like down the street from the studio.
Yeah.
That, like, this is, I'm so glad you brought that up, right? Because this is sort of what I'm talking about. Where my guilty pleasure is if I just need to fill the silence in my apartment and I can't be left alone with my own thoughts. I'm huge into fly fishing, and I'll just put on like fly fishing videos that people make of like, you know, those vacation videos people shoot with like a drone and stuff like that. That's cozy to me. And so many of them are in Iceland because Iceland has a pretty dope fishing culture. And
Mhm.
almost all of them are like these hip Americans that are like, we're going to the land of Vikings. And there's like all emphasizing the fact that everyone here is descended from Vikings and all that. And every time I watch one of these Icelandic videos, I just have to like roll my eyes, like, let's get to the Arctic Char. That's what I want to see here. So
Yeah.
if
I
you guys
mean
want to
the
have anything to add, I would love to hear it.
I mean the tourism industry really went all in on the Viking thing. You can get ye old Viking kebabs or whatever. But I mean, I get it. It's a lot of money to get people to come to Iceland to just
Mhm.
kind of put the Viking sticker on anything. I'm not really mad about it. I
Oh yeah, yeah.
probably it's totally understandable. I draw the line where like, I'm a tattoo artist and people come and they want the Viking compass. I will correct them. It's like the compass is not Viking, but
Thank you for your
still
service.
a great symbol. It's a magical symbol. It's just not Viking.
Mhm.
Um, Otherwise, yeah, I mean, a lot of course people have a lot of ideas about what Iceland is, but they learn very quickly when they come here that it's nothing like that.
Mhm.
No, I think one of our friends who is Icelandic actually referred to Iceland as Little America, which I found kind of funny.
I mean, in
Yeah,
some
I mean,
ways I see that, yeah.
we like to take after Uncle Sam for sure.
Because I live in one of the like hippest, bougiest cities in America. I'm in Boulder, Colorado, and every time I see the advertisements for Reykjavik and all that, it literally looks like little Boulder. And Matthias is right up the road, and we always have a good laugh at it. It's like they're trying to be like an Arctic Boulder. But also at the same time, Sigurbo, you're right. It's like it's not something to be mad about; it's something to have a laugh about. Because people are allowed to be interested in things and all that, but I'm more concerned with like the music side of it, where people are just like, oh, is everyone going to be throat singing and chanting about raiding villages when I go here? It seems like none of you guys can get away from that Viking label as hard as you try. Even Einar Selvik is on a stage in front of thousands of people around the world going, we're not Vikings, and then 3 minutes later someone's like, Viking music.
I mean, I'm not doing myself any favor because I do Viking reenactment as well, but I completely separate my music and my religion and Viking reenactments. These are three separate things that I do. I've combined my religion and my music to a lot degree, but
Mhm.
the reenactment thing is for fun. That's what I do. I've been doing it for 14 years. I like doing it.
Mhm.
So the Viking stamp is hard to peel off, but it doesn't bother me too much. It's more of I want people to be informed.
Yeah.
It's good to learn what things actually are, because the truth about Vikings is also cool, but not everything in the world is Viking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Will, you want to add?
No, I was just thinking about like yeah, people talk about people are starting to discover that like the Icelandic magical staves, were not done in the Viking Age.
Mhm.
And then they seem all like sad about it, which I find really confusing because it's still really cool, and it's something that like is kind of still alive today, that like people like Hrafnadr, our other bandmate, and Sivoli, like are keeping alive with like tattooing and stuff, creating magical staves on people's skin every day. And yeah, it's something I think we want to promote more of. It's yeah, it's cool, and it doesn't have to be from the 800s to be cool.
I love that you're bringing this up because I did a video two months ago, sort of talking about one of the reasons why Americans in particular get so interested in Vikings, and something that I've noticed from also teaching Vikings and Old Norse mythology here at CU Boulder, with Matthias, is that I have that same experience that you guys are describing. When you tell someone that something they like isn't Viking, they seem like, oh man, it's not, as if something has to be Viking to be cool, right? Meanwhile, I think that the medieval stuff is way more trippy and interesting in some ways. Like that's where people get really crazy. So I don't know. I don't really know where to go with this conversation other than just the fact that like it seems that there's this direct correlation people have between Viking and cool. And the second they find out that something isn't Viking, they drop it. Like, I'm done with this toy.
I think it's just Hollywood, really.
Yeah.
There came a lady into the studio and she wanted a little Viking helmet tattooed on her, and I explained to her that Vikings did not have horns on their helmets, and she was just gutted, like, "Oh my god, really? Oh, that sucks." And she left and came the next day. It's like, you know what? I still want the horned helmet tattooed. It's like, all right, you thought about it. It's like, whatever, if you want it. But like, she just like, I could not believe that they didn't have horns on their helmets.
Yeah, what do you guys think it is? I would love to hear your perspectives again as Icelanders and people doing this music. Is, you know, what do you think it is particularly about Vikings? Because this is clearly a subject I'm interested in doing this Nordic Sound Channel thing, because I can't say 5 words without stubbing my toe on something Viking. So I'd love to hear someone else's perspectives on it. Yeah.
I don't even know, because it's also the disappointing truth is that Vikings didn't, like, most of them didn't even do raids and pillage. They were traders or merchants. So people don't even like to hear that. I really don't know what it is. Like,
Yep.
all nations have had, you know, Vikings, pirates, raiders, whatever, but suddenly the Nordic people, they're the coolest. I don't know. I really don't know why it is so popular.
Will?
Yeah, I have no idea. Again, I mean, I just think it's the Hollywood image that they've made with TV shows like Vikings and whatnot, and people find that to be really cool. But you know, it's one thing if that's what gets you into the music, but I just hope people will explore further, and not be so pigeonholed into one thing. But like the sagas, like, are some of my favorite sagas, like Iceland Saga and Hailey Saga. These are awesome stories, and they're about Vikings, and they're cool as hell. Like, I get it, but
Yeah, Will, thank you for sort of like giving me a way to tie a bow on this, because, you know, I also do agree, right? It's again less something to be mad about and more something to just like sort of have a laugh at, because I'm in agreement with you, right? So like, I'm very clearly super interested in Viking history, right? Like, I teach it, I write about it, I do this channel that, you know, as I said, has to talk about Vikings a lot. So clearly I'm interested in it. But I agree with you that I wish that people would also step outside of the world of Vikings, especially if they're just into general pre-modern heathen sort of things, because there's a beautiful weird world of like pre-Christian pre-modern practices outside of the Vikings. I think it's just a cool starting point that I wish people would be a little bit more confident to leave sometimes.
yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Sigurd,
Yeah,
you want to add?
like I said before, kind of like people, they hang on to these untrue things because they're so cool, when there are true things that are even more cool, but they just want to believe that Vikings had horns on their helmets and whatnot. I don't know.
Awesome. Everyone's secretly really into Wagner's operas. They just don't want to admit it. So that's
guess
the real reason they're getting. That's the real reason they're getting the horn helmet tattoos. All right. So guys, I would love to bring it back around to your music, because I definitely want to give you guys a chance to talk about that some more. So you guys talked a little bit about how the band came to be, that beautiful love story, love at first sight. Do you want to come see my big drum? I'm going to remember that story for a very long time. And so I'll just say from my point of view, right? I know, Will, you sort of just said that Edda started off solo and sort of became VVAKI, if I understood that correctly.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, Cyril is the one that because we'd played this kind of music, but more just for our own spiritual purposes. And I remember specifically one experience it was the cave in Borgarnes, and correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, we found this singing cave, I guess you would call it, and we went up to it. Actually, there's a funny story about this cave, because, and I still don't know if Cyril was fucking with me or not, but he was like, we're gonna go try to find this cave, but like sometimes it changes location. I'm like, all right, dude, well, like, whatever, let's go find
It's
the
absolutely true. That cave moves.
And we did get to a point on the mountain where it looked like you were like, it's supposed to be here, and it looked like it could be an entrance to a cave, but it was just like blocked. I was like, all right, well, it's obviously not, so let's keep looking. And then we walked around for like another half an hour and we found it. And it's this cool, like there's an entrance, like a cave. And then there's like a little tunnel kind of that you have to crawl up into. And then there's like a chamber. And there is actually like a seat carved out in the back. So we just sat up there and with two drums and just singing verses from the Eddas and stuff. And when we came out, so it was like, you should record some of this. You should make music. And I was like, I don't know, nobody wants to hear this shit. But
I'm so
but
happy that you said that, because so many musicians feel that way at first, man.
yeah. But yeah, I did, and Sirwali was there for the whole first album, so it was more kind of my solo project and just trying to bring some of my favorite verses from the Edda to life, from the Poetic Edda, not Snorri Edda. I don't think I did anything from Snorri Edda, but yeah, Sirwali contributed drums and I think some talarpa and some vocals and a singular scream.
A singular scream, yeah.
Singular scream. Yeah, and then I guess we had the idea a couple of years ago to make VVAKI like a bigger thing, because I'd never thought even about playing live or anything like that. But I know, Sirwali, you were like itching to get on stage and make music and all that stuff. So we decided to, yeah, just give it a go and see what happens and make it like a serious project.
Yeah, we had been like doing like one-off like projects with these musicians and all that. You know, I said I've worked with Downheim and others, and I was just like, let's stop doing that and just really focus on this one thing, and let's really make it happen, and not just like kind of half-assed, but like the goal from the start was to play live. That's why we wrote these songs in mind that there are not too many instruments, like all the instruments that you hear are us playing on stage. Of course, there's soundscapes and stuff and like environmental sounds, but that's well. So there's three of us on stage, and that's what you hear, that's what you see, and that's always been the goal from when we decided to join forces.
Cool, yeah, because I've definitely noticed, when I was listening to, this morning just to get everything in my ear, I listened to Edda all the way through, and then sorry to butcher the pronunciations, Fornspeki, listened to them both front to back, and I can just definitely notice that there was definitely like an evolution or like a lot of growth that happened in terms of sound and at least intent from my point of view, listening to Fornspeki. And so like,
Yeah.
I guess actually, especially for Will, since this was your solo project, what was it like seeing this project that is now VVAKI sort of grow from Edda into Fornspeki, and now the third album that you've sort of teased coming up?
Incredible. I mean, a fully realized vision, and only because of the three beauties that are in the band now. And yeah, I mean, it is like when I listen to songs from Edda and then songs from Fornspeki, it's like, yeah, it's night and day. And a lot of that, of course, like the songwriting is very much similar, like the way that we write. But the addition of Gisli, like, yeah, I didn't really know what I was doing in terms of production. I have a little bit of knowledge. I'm not like blind on that front, but Gisli is an artist when it comes to music production and yeah, just creating these beautiful soundscapes. And yeah, he just really gets it, and he brought it to another level, along with Sirwali and the addition of Hrafnadur as well. We wanted to have that female aspect. Didn't want to just be a bunch of ugly grunting men all the time.
Yeah,
Oh.
it did add a lot of dynamic to have Hrafnadur as well.
Yeah. Sorry, I was caught on. Don't want to just be a group of grunting men. Where I want to go like with this, right, is so when you have this project grow, right, there's still that element that it's still VVAKI, right? Like I can still hear the similarities between Edda and Fornspeki, and I'm assuming whatever album you guys have coming out is still going to sound like VVAKI to me. And so as a listener, I can sort of like spend all day saying, what is the VVAKI sound? But for you guys, despite all the change and growth that's happening, what is there anything that sort of stays at the core of like what you want VVAKI to be, that stays consistent through all this growth, or something you guys latch onto?
I think it really resonates with me what Will actually said once, that when we're composing a song, the song becomes what it wants to be. It's kind of hard to describe, but when you're writing a song, you can't just like, oh, I want there to be this breakdown right now. But if it doesn't fit, then it doesn't fit. We just have to kind of go with. But I think usually we set out, like, before we compose a song, we have an idea of like, we want to compose a song about this subject, and then work on the song, because you want to, like, if you're composing a song about anger, you don't make it all beautiful, you know what I mean? You have to sort of like hone in the sounds on what you want to happen in the song.
Yeah, I think yeah, without to get too like woo woo, I think sometimes songs are given to us by outside other forces, whether you want to call them gods or spirits or whatever. Yeah, and I think those are the best songs. Of course, there's still songs that like on Vévaki, where we've had to really pick at them and really like chip away to get the carving that we wanted. But I think the best ones are the ones that are given to you and just kind of flow naturally. So we kind of, I think in the writing process, we try to invoke trance states and stuff like that, things that will induce that kind of writing process that comes from somewhere else.
Beautifully put. Yeah. I've talked about this a few times on the channel, but what you're talking about is actually a pretty significant part of hardanger fiddling tradition. There's a book put out by a really wonderful hardanger fiddler named Benedicta Marseth, and the book is called To Be Nothing, To Be Nothing. And she talks about throughout this whole book that there's an ethos in hardanger fiddling where the music is out there, and when you play the hardanger fiddle, you become nothing but a conduit for that music that's already out there. So definitely check out that book if that's the kind of music making ideology you're into, because it's a pretty cool read. But going, awesome. Yeah, it is. I'll send you the link to it if you want to check it out. But yeah, so there's also this, Sigurboth, you mentioned at the beginning, so many of us start with Vardruna, right? Literally wearing a Vardruna shirt, right? So they definitely have this underlying thing where they sort of like catalyzed this beginning to this music scene, or at least revitalized this interest in this kind of music making. But this might be a provocative question, but is there a way that you guys go about making music in this subculture that's very heavily derived from like one or two bands without being derivative?
I mean, I just don't listen to them anymore. I will not listen to. If I'm in a writing stage and we're writing a lot of music, I'll mostly listen to metal or something. I won't really turn on the heathen music, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but I think just being genuine, being yourself, and just letting the songs come that come, and not trying to be anything really. It's a simple answer, because it's just just don't try to be those bands.
Yeah, I just real quick, just following, like, do you decide not to listen to them because you're worried you might accidentally absorb something and like just copy it like subconsciously? Or I would love to hear a little bit more about that, like what goes behind that decision.
Yeah, I think like you definitely can be too influenced by something and then it comes out. I mean, you hear comedians talk about it all the time, worried about stealing other comedians' bits and stuff like that, because they're just around it so much. But no, I just want to be in a separate headspace.
All right, cool. Yeah, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to say more about that. Right? Yeah, Sigurboth.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was more like listening to Vardruna as a at least younger version of myself. It's like kind of opened up the world of like, whoa, never heard this kind of stuff before. But yeah, I mean, yeah, we're in the same genre of music as Vardruna, but it's like saying because we've been called like, oh, these guys are copying and they're copying Hailey. And then I guess like all black metal is copying Dark Throne or something. Like we're in the same genre, but we are nothing alike because we're not trying to. We're just doing our own thing. We have no goal in cop because we respect their music greatly, but we're not trying to be them. We're trying to be Vévaki.
Yeah, I feel like if I was writing a black metal album, I would probably just be listening to like Bach or like
Grateful Dead.
Yeah, Grateful Dead. Something Backstreet Boys.
Yeah, I mean, because like this is not new to like new music styles, right? Because like, you know, back in the 70s, anyone who was doing hard rock or then heavy metal was accused of just copying Led Zeppelin, right? And then, you know, thrash metal bands, everyone's like, oh, you're just copying Metallica or something like that. So many music scenes, when they're first like finding their footing, always have like that North Star band. Black metal's got Dark Throne, for instance, where they've opened up this Pandora's box of new sound, like new possibilities for a music style. And then, especially at the very beginning of that new music style, it is so difficult to make music in it without being told, like, oh, you're just copying the first. We all are, in a way. That's how music styles go. Everyone thought that, you know, in classical music, you brought up Bach. Everyone thought that people were just copying Bach for 200 years, and then Beethoven, and then that that trend just keeps going. How do you guys deal with that sort of stuff?
I mean, we see the comments all the time. One of the funniest ones I found was, I guess when we released our song Heimdallar Galdur, there's throat singing in it. And so one of the comments was, oh, they're just copying The Who. Nobody in the band listens to The Who. So
the Who are the only the only band who does throat singing properly is The Who. Everybody else is just a poser.
Yeah. So yeah, but I also see people write wonderful things like well, I see sometimes like, oh, finally I have another band to add to this very short list of bands that I can listen to in the genre. That's nice.
Yeah, I mean, like, oh no, you continue. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, because, you know, something I've had a few bands who were younger than you guys and just getting started out, who all the time, sort of, when I have them on this channel, they'll talk about how, you know, does this genre have room to grow, or will it be sort of like confined to Vardruna, Heilung, Skald, Danheim, that sort of thing forever? And I'm always like, no, I don't see that happening, right? Because new ideas come along, even if it's with the same set of sounds or instruments. I mean, they're always concerned that, like, you know, is there enough room for us in this scene, because they feel like it's crowded. But then at the same time, the amount of times I see those same bands suddenly gain popularity because people like, finally something new to listen to. I feel like people do get tired of listening to, because Vardruna, you can't blame it on Vardruna. They can't release a new album every year to keep people satisfied. We need more voices, more perspectives, more ideas within this sound style, within this music style. And so I guess sort of something I would love for you guys to do is have an opportunity to maybe take this to tell musicians who are trying to get into this, you know, what advice do you have for those sorts of musicians who are worried that, you know, this music style is forever going to be occupied by the same four bands?
Well, I mean, if you think about like when black metal was starting out, it was all kind of the same, I guess. But then, you know, Emperor and Vindir and Dimmerborgir started using synths, and everybody, oh, they're ruining black metal. They're just completely should, you know, go away. But then everybody's like, oh wait, that's actually pretty sick. Maybe if we had like have an entire goddamn symphony with this black metal band, it grows the way one. There's always going to be gatekeepers and haters.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, whatever. Don't bother with that. Just do what you want.
Yeah, I think finding your own perspective that you want to put forth is always good for newer bands. Like, find your niche. What is it that you want to convey? I think maybe a lot of younger artists just go in and they're like, yeah, I think this music's cool and I do want to make a project that sounds just like Vardruna. And that might not really take off because people have heard that already and it's not completely genuine. Mm-hmm. There's no like original take there. So just maybe try to figure out what you're trying to convey. Like, we are very like, I don't think there's any other there are bands that sing verses from the Poetic Edda that might be like Old Icelandic, but there's no bands in the genre that are only singing in Icelandic, modern Icelandic, and Old Icelandic. So I think that is something that makes us quite special, to bring the Icelandic perspective and to keep the language going, like in this kind of music, because that, yeah, I'm not naming names, but it's not always the best representation of the language.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say I'm not gonna name names, but there's plenty of bands that claim to be singing in Icelandic, but well, as an Icelanders, I can't understand a single word they say.
Yeah, right. And I think this is a problem of well, not a problem, right? I think it's just like musicians, when they're getting started out, they always feel like they need to copy someone if they want to do something right. And I think that's understandable, right? But I think there is a lot to be said between what you guys were just talking about. You can give 50 different musicians the same idea for a song, and you're not going to get 50 of the same songs. Even if you give them the same chord progression to work with, you're going to get 50 very different songs. And I think that that's one of the exciting things about this genre to me, is we're at that point where it's like you give 50 different bands the same idea for the song of what's going to happen. You have no idea. And so maybe trust in the fact that your own individual perspective and voice is going to lend something new if you just give yourself the faith and respect to be yourself.
Yeah, I really enjoyed when like Ocean and the Jupiter went a bit like Americana.
I love them.
I love his other albums as well, but like when he went a little bit more Americana, it felt so real. I really loved that.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to see them and meet them at Cascadian Midsummer, which is a festival that happened in June. And yeah, it's just like I told him, I was like, man, the two albums you did, the first one is like the Swamp album cover. I can't remember the name of it. And then the new one, Cedar and Sage. Like, as an Americana musician myself, like that opened the door for me as someone who's both a banjo player and a lover of this like heathen dark folk music style. I was like, this is new. This is a possibility. So I agree with you, right? It's not that he wasn't being himself at the beginning, but it was just like more he started exploring his own personal interests in music, and it gave us Cedar and Sage, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, 100%.
Do you have anything to add, Sigerboli?
Well, I was more thinking of just adding to what I said previously, so I don't sound like a total dick. It's totally fine. It's totally fine to sing things in Icelandic if you don't have to be Icelandic. It's more of when people claim like this is what Old Norse sounds like we don't know what it sounds like. But Matthias probably has a pretty good idea, but it's more of that when you make claims like that, it's like, well, you gotta back it up, and Icelanders can't understand you. Whatever, I'm just being a little dick.
No, man, I mean, I think this is important too, right? Normally I do keep things pretty positive on this channel, but at some point, you do have to look at this sort of stuff and be honest, right? I think that it's necessary for a subculture to not only grow, but to also sort of like not gain validation, but in some ways just like become its own if you are real about some of the less great parts of it. Like, I'll say I think black metal got better when people stopped allowing just like straight up neo-Nazis to just like be that way, and no one even thought about it. Not saying that mispronouncing Icelandic is the same as being a neo-Nazi, right? But the basic idea of being open about not so great things or weaknesses in a music style, I think are really important parts of letting a subculture, a new music genre grow and just become better when people, are a little bit more understanding of what's lame.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I can't wait for HBO to release like a samurai series, and everybody kind of focuses on samurais instead of Vikings.
Yeah, man, I don't know. Speaking from the point of view of a historian, people have been obsessed with Vikings since the Middle Ages, so I don't think that shit's going anywhere anytime soon.
Well, I guess we gotta try to educate people then instead of being mad about it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, people are in that phase now, right? I do think, just judging from especially this year's Midgardsblot and last year's Midgardsblot, just if you want to look at that as a little microcosm of this music culture, people are definitely opening up more and more about fantasy, versus reality. There's room for both. People love fantasy. I've got a whole Tolkien collection on this back shelf here, right? But I'm not going to sit here and say Middle Earth exists, right? And so people sort of sometimes go the same way about fantasy Vikings. And even Shel Broughton, he gave an awesome talk at the talks this year at Midgardsblot about the difference between fact versus fantasy of Viking music, and people were really into it. So I think in general, people do want to learn and open up, and I think that's one of the strengths of this music culture that's so rooted in history, is it's an opportunity to teach people as well as entertain.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I did notice on because I went a few years ago to Midgars Blood, and then this year, and like before I say this, it's totally fine if people want to paint runes on their faces and all that. I'm not talking against that, but I did notice that there were way less people this year painting their face with runes, and maybe because they're kind of learning that that's not what Vikings did. They didn't have that black, how they do it in the show, you know what I mean? That's because the show is a TV show, it's not real. But I thought it was like some people who were wearing like whole crowns of horns, and it was super sick. I thought it was really, really cool. But I have noticed it's getting less and less that people do this, because I guess people are learning that it's actually not very Viking to pretend to be Viking.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah, because look, I'm a strong advocate for being a lover of like fantasy, right? I will never tell anyone not to, but the thing for me, right, is always I want people to know if what they're doing is fantasy or reality. So it's like when I tell someone, right, like painting Elder Futhark runes on your face is not very Viking, right? That's not the same as me telling someone don't do it. Like, do it, have a blast with it, but know that that's not history. Yeah. And I just think that makes things a little better when people don't confuse history with fantasy. Anyway, does anyone else have any closing thoughts on that?
No, not really. I think just be yourself, be genuine.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
Hakuna Matata.
All right, awesome. So guys, I've been holding you hostage here for almost an hour at this point. I'm just having a blast talking to you guys. I do want to give you guys an opportunity to talk about an upcoming album if you want to, or if you can, or if it's still hush hush. I just want my invitations there.
Yeah, we are working on music. Yes. No,
shocker. Yeah.
That's pretty much what we can say at this point.
Okay. But I think we touched on it a little bit before. It will deal with some more specifically Icelandic melodic structure and content as well.
I'm so happy for that, because Icelandic folk music, the traditional Icelandic music, gets like no attention compared to Norwegian and Swedish. And I'm really looking forward to someone paying attention to that, because that is not a literal gold mine. I don't want to tell you guys you've struck financial gold here by doing this, but at least in terms of creativity and something new, I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do with that.
Yeah. Well, one thing I can say, I guess, is at Midgardsblot we did play a new song. I don't know if some people may have noticed.
Some did. Some pointed it out. They were like, "What song was that? I don't remember that one."
Maybe something happening there soon. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know anything. You didn't hear it from me.
I'm not in VVAKI.
I think in between, not to give too much away, but I think in between this album, Fornsveki, and the next one, there might be some old songs that are not so new that you might hear in a new light.
Oh, cool.
That might be what you heard at Midgardsblot a little bit.
Awesome, man. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I've got my eye out for it because, as I told you guys, I'm a newcomer to you, but some of my patrons in particular really steered me right when they're like, "You haven't listened to VVAKI yet?" I'm like, "No, I don't know what happened." And just to give you guys a little bit of a background, one of my friends and patrons, they do suspension rituals. They do the hooks in the skin and raised up, the stuff I can't look at. And she told me that the very first one she ever did, they asked, "What music do you want to put on?" And she put on your music for it. And so in her very first one. So just so you guys know, you've already done quite a good job of like communicating something special to people.
On our music.
Oh, that was great. Maybe I should end it there. Well, guys, I've really enjoyed talking to you. I really love getting to know you guys a little bit more. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about you, or if they want to listen to more of more of your music?
Yeah, well, other platforms, Spotify, and yeah, we're trying to keep up with posting and stuff on Instagram and all that stuff, and
Never ending
trying to,
job.
yeah,
Yeah.
we want to give more of an insight into yeah, what goes on in our heads when we
Mhm.
do things. But
We
yeah,
are signed with Season of Mist,
Mhm.
and our booking agent is called Doomstar Booking. So if anybody can stay in touch with them. Yeah, any music platform you will find us, unless it's something really obscure. But
Awesome. Well, guys, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. Glad you guys shed. Most of all, I'm really glad that you guys had the opportunity to shed some light on Icelandic perspectives on things. You guys, Iceland doesn't usually get its time in the on the microphone to talk about this sort of stuff. So I do really appreciate you guys coming on and speaking your minds. All right.
yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah, you
thank you
got
so
it,
much.
man. All right, cool. Yeah, I'll have you on next time you guys have a new album. So just keep me in mind. So anyway, thank you guys so much. And for my listeners, you guys know where to find me. And until next time, I guess I will see you guys later.
Bye bye.